Welcome to RBellissimo at the Movies, where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Matt Page, who is the author of 100 Bible Films. Matt, welcome back. Thanks for being here again.
Hi, Robert. Thanks ever so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure to appear on your show. I've always enjoyed our chats in the past.
Me
So
too.
yeah, nice to be here again.
Me too. Yeah, it's great to have you again. And we're tackling Pasolini once again. Last time we discussed Acatone. Now we're discussing his second feature right after that, which is Mamma Roma. So I'll read a brief
Yeah,
synopsis. After years spent working as a prostitute in her Italian village, middle-aged Mamma Roma has saved enough money to buy herself a fruit stand so that she can have a respectable middle-class life and reestablish contact with the 16-year-old son she abandoned when he was an infant. But her former pimp threatens to expose her sordid past, and her troubled son seems destined to fall into a life of crime and violence. This was directed and written by Pier Paolo Pasolini, and it starred Anna Magnani and Ettore Garofalo and Franco Citti, Silvana Corsini. Um, I think he's 18. I know this is I'm reading that off Letterboxd because when
yeah,
he says to Bruna, his love interest in the film, she says she's 24, and then he says, "Oh, you're 6.5 years older than me." So he's like 17, 18. But just to clear
yeah.
that up for the diehard Pasolini fans who might. um, so do you remember when you first saw the film, Matt, and what you initially thought?
I don't know that I do actually. I think it would have been quite a while ago. Maybe kind of getting on for 10 years or so ago now. So I would have watched it partly because of my interest in Il Vangelo Secondo Matteo, and wanting to kind of fill out Pasolini's other films. So I don't remember my first viewing of it particularly strongly. But then I remember watching it uh, a few times more recently, and really kind of getting drawn into it as a film, and the links with Akatone are very very strong.
Yeah,
It's almost kind of like a there are elements of it's almost a kind of remake, only with slightly different a few key points
yeah.
slightly manipulated, but yeah,
Yeah, I was trying to I remember watching it for the first time, but I couldn't quite it's sometime in the last 20 years for sure. It must have
Mm.
been around 2007 or 8 or something like that. But
Yeah,
um I mean I always really liked it, and I've seen it a decent amount of times. And this this last viewing I had, because it's one of those films that are just so rich that
yeah,
you always pick up on something new with each viewing. But this last time, one thing that really popped out to me was that I find it interesting that he wrote this part for Magnani,
yeah,
and because a little trivia, she saw Acatone and wanted to work with Pasolini, and so he wrote this for her. But it's interesting that he wrote about a woman who wants to join the middle class when he when he himself hated the middle class.
yeah, yeah,
But I think I was sort of reflecting on that, and I guess you could say that he thinks that she's just morally bankrupt from the beginning, from or maybe that's just what he witnessed, that people want, if they're not in it, they want to join it. So he's being maybe truthful to that, to that way of thinking. But I was curious at what you thought
yeah.
about just that part of it. It's interesting that he'd write a character like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, the whole dynamic between them is really interesting. I think he says in his interviews with Oswald Stack that it was his only casting mistake was to cast Magnani, not because she isn't a great actor, because obviously she was, but almost because she was too much of a great actor, and he preferred
Yeah, yeah,
um, that kind of more non-professional angle, and people that weren't really kind of acting, they were just being. But it's kind of very interesting, her role, because she has this. I mean, she was a massive star in Italy at the time, and she kind of brings this. She does bring this kind of appealing star power to her role, even though her role is, um, I mean, certainly by today's standards, is a bit of a kind of outlier, I suppose, in terms of um, normal behavior, but almost the elements that I think probably people today might recoil from a little bit. Her kind of, her kind of loudness and her kind of vulgarity are almost the elements that Pasolini likes the most,
Right.
and her kind of striving to better herself and her striving to her kind of. He talks a lot about kind of petit bourgeois ideas, and those things of kind of trying to get into that middle class thing. That seems to be the thing that he likes the least about the character from
Yeah.
what he says about it. He has this really strong idea about the kind of peasant classes in Italy at the time, the kind of sub-proletariat, whether that's the kind of farming classes in the south or the kind of industrial workers in the north. But but this idea that they have still retained something of kind of like mythical, spiritual, kind of sacred life in their kind of their way of life has retained that, which the other classes, particularly the middle class, has lost
Mm.
um, through capitalism, and by kind of caving into capitalism, they've
Right.
lost that sense. And so he kind of sees her role, I think, um, as a bit of a kind of class traitor almost, that she is kind of
Yeah.
leaving behind this way of life which he admires so much and think has the kind of answer to well, not necessarily the answer to, but this kind of sacred thing to become this striving more middle class thing. Whereas I think to most people in our world, that kind of trying to better yourself and
Yeah.
lift yourself out of kind of poverty and do something better for your kids is something that you you warm to her because of that, and that seems to be her at her best. And it's quite a kind of it's an interesting tension, I think, watching it as a modern viewer, and then reading about what Pasolini was thinking about the characters, 64 years ago.
Hmm. She's also, she says these horrible things about, people who are like, for the farmers and the peasants, like she constantly
Yeah,
calls them hicks.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and she doesn't want her son to become like that, and
No, no.
that sort of thing. But it's interesting because if you know nothing about Pasolini, you might be on her side and think, oh well, she's right.
Yeah,
Not the way she criticizes the
no.
farmers and stuff, but you might be on her side, like, oh well, this, yeah, that makes sense. Of course you want to better yourself. Of course you don't want
Yeah,
to
yeah.
you don't want to be a prostitute and working on the streets. But then the more you the more you lean into Pasolini's way of thinking, um, it starts to it starts to dawn on you that, oh well, actually, what if she were to have a quote unquote better life, that wouldn't necessarily make anything better for her,
Yeah.
because then she'd be part of the bourgeois and the capitalist system, and so what she wants might sound appealing, but like, I guess it depends on the audience member, how politically, how one would look at the film in a political way. Is
Yeah.
it yeah, the more you know about politics and the more left leaning you are, I think, particularly as left leaning as Pasolini, you might right away
Yeah.
understand, oh, she's totally morally bankrupt. But then someone who's not political at all might just think she's completely right. Like, it's
Mm,
very interesting, that the contradictions in
yeah.
there.
Well, yeah, and I think so. So much of how society has moved on in that time. I mean, I think kind of Pasolini across his film career kind of saw the dying of that social class and those understandings that he romanticized so much. And to us now, we've kind of moved so far beyond that. It's really difficult to get your head around what he was even thinking about,
Yeah,
and how you could view that kind of aspiration to improve your lot in a negative way and be happy, and to want to kind of celebrate characters um, like Akatoni and like um, Ettore in this film. And so it's yeah, so it and even kind of even forms of socialism, Marxism, communism today. I think have gone along that path. I mean, even in his own lifetime, um, he was a committed Marxist, and within the kind of PC, the Italian Communist Party. But he was always a bit of a kind of fringe, argumentative figure in tension with the overall leadership. You know, he was always had his own unusual ideas, even at the time. And I think they've become even
Yeah.
more unusual as time has gone on, really.
Yeah, I mean the right certainly hated him, but even he was even hated on the left.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
which is he's such a fascinating person. But it's a shame that he was I can see why he, in a way, from his perspective, he'd be disappointed in Magnani's performance because he liked those non, he casted faces, right? And he was so good at
yeah,
casting faces, and so bringing her into it just brings it to a completely different place where because she's not that you catch her quote unquote acting because she's so real. I mean, she's so
yeah.
truthful. I mean, I think she's amazing in it. I mean,
Mm,
I could see why he'd be disappointed, but I still love her in it. I think she gave like it's a powerhouse performance. I mean, particularly there's that moment at the end when she spoiler alert, we're all spoilers here anyways. Anyone anyone watching the
yeah,
show knows by now, but when she finds out that her son dies, um it cuts right to her face and you know
yeah,
right away that she knows. Like you don't need any
yeah,
exposition and you just see the shock in her eyes and I'm like, wow, that is not easy to do.
yeah,
It's a phenomenal it's a phenomenal performance from everybody, even like what he got out of the non-professionals.
yeah.
The son as well. His real name is Ettore. He he's really good in it. Like I thought he was very, very
Oh, yeah.
good.
Yeah, for
Uh,
someone so young, yeah. Well, I
yeah,
mean, even for someone quite old, it's an amazing
yeah,
performance.
it's
You
an
know,
amazing
I think it was,
performance. I
I think
quite
it was
like
more or less.
Chidi. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's more or less the only thing he ever did as well, isn't it? Can't. Am I right
I
about that? I
believe,
forgot to check
yeah,
him before.
he's in a few things. Yeah, he's in. I'm just on
No,
Letterbox. He has 11 credits. So
right.
he was in a few other
He did a
things.
couple of. He was in a couple of other Pasolini things
Yeah,
briefly,
he
wasn't
was in
he? Yeah.
La Ricotta, the one that he did
Uh,
the short with Wells.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, he was in a few other. He 4, 8, yeah, 11 things. So that's but
yeah.
he's very, and
Okay.
then of course you have Citti in there as Carmine,
Yeah,
who I also is. I'm sure you read this, but um, because he got arrested during the shoot, they had I think they had to cut his part down. I think his part was supposed to be bigger.
oh, was it?
Yeah,
I hadn't heard that. That's
yeah. I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, I read a couple like Pasolini just waited for him to get out of jail, like he
yeah,
refused to replace him. But something I did read something else like his part was supposed to be bigger, but I don't want to verify that because I'm not sure 100% if that's true. But
I mean,
anyways,
it would potentially make sense because it does feel like he kind of drops in and drops out again,
yeah.
doesn't he? Right? Yeah, but
And it's very interesting because he has such a hold on Mama Roma. Like, and we see at the
yeah,
beginning, like he's getting married. So he's, what we're led to assume is that he's no longer going to be a pimp. And so she's
yeah,
going to leave and he is her pimp. So she's going to leave the life and start this fruit stand and take care of her son and leave the street walking life behind.
yeah.
And then when he
And that's the
comes,
deal at the wedding, isn't it? That's the
yeah,
what is kind of explicitly agreed in front of everyone that she's now free and
yeah.
free from him.
Yeah, they even in the wedding, like they refer to her as like that she was his slave,
Yeah,
and things like that. But I mean, she's so joyful in that first scene and the singing and bringing the pigs into the wedding and she's really happy that
yeah,
she's gonna be out of this life. And then you see like the tension between the two of them
yeah,
with he's not very happy. Like I took it that because maybe she was drawing attention from everything with the singing, like or that he's not crazy about the way she's behaving,
yeah,
or he already knows he doesn't want to let her go. But it's interesting because it's not until later that he says, well, if you don't continue working for me, then I'll tell your son about what you've done or what you're
Yeah.
doing. But in the first scene, he doesn't say that. He just sort of says,
No.
he just guilt trips her and blames her for the fact that he became a pimp and it's all her fault and he was
Yeah.
young and impressionable, and so it's sort of open-ended. You don't really know exactly what happened here, but he doesn't
No.
blackmail her initially. It's just like, I need money, these investments he's gonna make, and so you
In a
have to.
strange business with his
Yeah.
buying a cow and chopping it up
Yeah.
himself.
Yeah.
What what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, of course, of course. But I don't know. Other than he just has this strong hold over her, this way to manipulate and guilt
Yeah.
trip her, because I did kind of initially think, what is it about him that is making her go back into this life? Because like I
Mm.
said, he doesn't blackmail her till it's not till later that the blackmailing starts. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I do wonder. I do wonder. This isn't at all a firm theory. I'm interested to know what you think about this, but I do wonder if he is also Ettore's father.
Yeah, that was
Um,
something that
whether
some people
and
think.
whether he knows that or he doesn't know that. But yeah, that's kind of one thought I've had about that situation. But I guess also that I suppose he's a personification of a way of her old life, kind of trying to claw her back in, and trying to
Yeah,
not kind of as much as she tries to kind of wrestle herself free, there's always these forces that are putting her back into the life she wants to leave behind. And so I think he's quite an example of that. And I think he's quite a kind of, because it's because he obviously played Akatone in Pasolini's first film. There's quite and there's a lot of the character is very similar. In fact, I think there's even one theory I've read out there that he's almost like the kind of grown up version of Akatone. A few years down the line, and
right.
this is now what he's been doing for a while. Um, certainly he's kind of in that neighborhood of character of well, why should he go and get a he's realized, having let her go, that why should he go and why should he have to go and get a job when he can just laze around as
Yeah,
Akatone does and put a woman out to to do sex work and give him a cut.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I wondered about that too because she taught, I love those street walking scenes at night. Like, they're beautifully
Mm,
photographed. Like the light, the white from the lights really pop. I mean,
yeah,
it's beautifully photographed. And I love how she's talking to one guy and then that guy just falls behind and then it's a new guy she's talking to. And
yeah,
she doesn't even seem aware that she's talking to someone new now. But she talks about two different marriages, one being this much older rich man. He was
yeah,
65, she was 14, and her parents said, "Oh, marry him because he's rich." And that clearly fell apart. We don't know how or
yeah,
what, well, other than, okay, obvious, for obvious reasons. There's like a 50-year age
yeah,
gap. Um, and then she talks about this other marriage to this young guy who was young. So, like, I think
yeah,
that's where the theory comes in that it's possibly Carmine.
yeah,
But that's what's interesting about the film is that in a good way, it has this like choppy structure. Like he doesn't tell you everything, and
no,
it clearly was, or he doesn't show you everything. Like, for example, there's this scene where she wants to blackmail the owner of that restaurant in order to get
yeah,
Ettore a job there. Um, but it happens so quickly because she's like, okay, this she goes to the one prostitute and to that other friend of hers, like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna threaten this guy, and then at first it takes a few minutes to sort of put together why she's doing this, but then
yeah,
you don't see the scene of her saying, okay, well, I won't tell you that I won't tell anyone about you and this prostitute if you give my son a job, because he's
yeah,
married, and then she sets it up so that he's caught with this prostitute. but you don't see that. So I remember the first
No,
time I saw it, I was a little like, what? Like, why is he suddenly,
yeah,
it just all of a sudden it just cuts to like the next day, and she's like, oh, it's your first day on the job today. And I'm like, what? How did he get this job? Because he couldn't like, how could he suddenly be a waiter? Um,
yeah.
so, but then he clearly intentionally left these things out. So it's
But I
choppy,
think he
but I
does
kind of
like
like
these kind
it.
of choppy jumps as well.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, but it kind of really keeps the audience on their toes, because he
Mm.
he doesn't show you or tell you everything.
No, I wonder how whether some of that was also down to kind of trying to get the film cleared by the censors as well.
Oh,
I know there was a lot.
possibly, yeah.
So there'd been some kind of issue with the censors around language that he was using in the film, which seems very tame
Yeah.
for us, compared to what we're used to today. But it was kind of relatively shocking then. But also there was the kind of a lot of kind of more political groups didn't like it. There was a story of a scuffle
Yeah.
with a neo-fascist in the lobby of the cinema afterwards. And and that same year, he obviously, he did. It wasn't on the scale of the kind of situation with La Cotta where he was actually prosecuted for it,
Yeah.
but already I think he was butting into those objections, and there were some severe objections around the film,
Yeah.
and some of it's even though it's I mean, if you imagine how this story would be portrayed by a lot of even kind of fairly middle of the road directors today, it would be far, 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 far stronger, I think, and those missing scenes would undoubtedly be shown. But
Mhm. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah, it could possibly have been that, but I think it sort of works with the roughness of the piece.
yeah,
The cinematography is very gritty, so it's in that neo-realist tradition. But then at the same time, as you probably know this, like a lot of those images, like the Christ-like figure of Ettore at the end, like a lot of that comes from
mm,
paintings. So
yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of his influence on a lot of the images, and you see that throughout his films. He was extremely influenced by painting. So
yeah,
you can really really see that.
yeah. I mean, he's very much into his kind of. I mean, I think he originally had come from a kind of history background,
Yeah.
and so that's in a lot of his films. I mean, particularly here, you've got that kind of Last Supper scene as well. In
Yes.
the from the
In the
that opening
beginning.
scene
Yeah.
is very kind of pointed, and then that final scene. I mean, it's Mantega's kind of I can't remember the exact title of the poster, but that kind of the shot of the kind of Christ from the bottom is a kind of
Yeah.
is Mantega, but also he was quite disappointed, I think, at the time that people only focused on that aspect of it and not some of the kind of lighting. He talks about the lighting kind of having aspects of Caravaggio and
Yeah.
Masaccio, and so some of the so there were kind of a lot of those illusions were very much intentionally left in, and what he was trying to kind of convey some of that stuff. And again, it's this thing of the kind of the sacredness of life and his whole idea about kind of contamination, to use his term, which I think he perhaps viewed slightly more neutrally than we do. But he really liked kind of putting high art and low art stuff together, or kind of high culture and low culture. He liked, and so so we get that with the kind of the imagery of the imagery referring to these kind of great works of art against some of the imagery of just slums and ordinary people in the slums and kind of ordinary peasants, and that those kind of images. And we get it in the soundtrack as well. I mean, this is perhaps not quite as extreme as Il Vangelo, but we get a lot of this, a lot of kind of different Vivaldi pieces and this kind of very refined music, and then we also get things like Carlo Rusticchio's Stornello, which is the kind of like the type sound partway through,
Yeah.
um, and Violino Zigano by Joselito. So kind of occurs, which is the song that they dance to at the start in the apartment,
Oh,
and
right,
then
right.
and then later you see him steal some of her records and sell them. And the guy puts one
Yes.
along and says, "Oh, what's this?" And it's it's literally, I mean, it's literally it's the same song that they dance to in this moment that um, I think feels incredibly poignant to her at that point. For him, is just a kind of a way of earning a bit of cash and something he's kind of memory he's kind of casually trading in for a bit of extra money. So I'm sorry, I've gone completely off on one there, but
No, no,
but
no.
but
Yeah.
but certainly he liked that thing of juxtaposing these very different elements together and to kind of create something new by kind of fusing these two opposites.
Yeah, the image of Ettore on the cross is very interesting
Mm,
I couldn't help but wonder what I mean, we can never know what an artist is intending, and we can only like sort
mm,
of interpret. But um, to me, I thought because this when Mama Roma is talking on the street and she looks up to the sky and she says, "Why are you the king of kings and I'm a nobody?" You know? So
yeah,
I think by placing him and on like on this cross like figure, I think to me, I thought he was saying, well, like these people are somebodies. They are the king of kings, the people of the
mm,
slums, and the working class. Like I think it's sort of he's sort of saying that they're not nobodies. That maybe Mama Romana
yeah.
perceives herself that way, but like that's not the case. I don't know if that was something you thought of or what you thought of that.
No, that's really interesting. I've kind of, I mean, again, it's this similarity with Akatone, which again, you have a lot of uh, Christ parallels with him as a character specifically, and people always
Yeah,
kind of talk about him as being a kind of Christ figure in that film, even though he is this fairly despicable figure in that. Um, and I don't know that I have a good answer. I quite like your answer, but I've kind of heard other things as well. That his death is, potentially a warning about, what happens when you try and leave these things behind, or the perils of embracing a more consumerist lifestyle.
oh, I see. Yeah, yeah, I can
I,
see that.
I've heard various things, but I don't find any of them really necessarily convincing.
Right.
But
Right.
but yeah, and I think as you've said already, there's not necessarily like
No.
one answer that is there and made kind of available. And even when you hear Pasolini talk sometimes, and he tells you these things, it's difficult to really know
Right.
what he means. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting to me, but you're right. I mean, the way in which takes this influence from painting and then this mix of neorealism is kind of like, the way he mixes these things is it
mm,
forces the audience to make judgment calls because he's not giving you any answers, right? So,
no,
but it's stimulating, certainly. But it's yeah, that was something I on my last viewing was another discovery because when she said that, I thought, I wonder if these are the quote unquote somebodies and these are the quote unquote
yeah,
kings of kings is in Pasolini's eyes, just that they don't see it, and the tragedy is that Mama Roma doesn't see it. Um,
mm,
but it's also quite fascinating that you know starts to fall for Bruna, um,
yeah,
and of course Mama Roma is like trying to destroy it. Again, she always uses her. It's just interesting that she wants to leave her life of prostitution, but yet when she wants something done, she goes right into those people.
yeah,
She
yeah,
try she like when she tries to get Ettore a job, she goes to the priest, and I
yeah,
thought, he gave her sound advice, like, wow, you can't just expect him to get a good job without some kind of trade or skill. Like,
yeah.
he can help get him a bricklayer job, but no, she wants something more quote unquote distinguished,
Respectable.
yeah,
Yeah,
respectable. So in her eyes, it was to be a waiter. So she goes into the underworld to get that done. And then the same thing, she goes to her friend who's also a prostitute and says, "Oh, spend the night with my son," so he forgets about this woman. And I thought, well,
Yeah,
what is so wrong with this woman? But then again, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's because she's part of the lower classes, and it's
yeah,
she wants her son to rise. Um, so that was quite. I found that quite sad because, um, she's like this pretty young woman, and there's clearly a connection there, and so Mama Roma just can't. She's got those good intentions, but she just can't help but sabotage
yeah,
these things,
yeah, yeah. Although I mean, I guess also the relationship between those two falls apart a little bit with the scene where some of the people he's been gambling with uh
Oh, right.
decide they want to, he wants to go off with Bruna for, for a bit of time alone between the two of them, and then all his kind of gambling. I mean, I don't want to call them friends because they end up beating him up, don't they? And then
Yeah.
going off with her, and she seems unhappy with it initially, but then once he's like beaten up and in the dust, then she's like, "Well, see, I'm off with these guys now." Which again is a kind of interesting scene, and almost that I don't know. I mean, again, that's another one of those scenes where you don't get a kind of nicely packaged answer. She doesn't kind of say, "Oh, right, I've changed my mind now," and and this is why this is happening. So you don't know whether she recognizes that that's the only way she can get out of that, the safest way for her to get out of that situation, or whether it's that she's no longer interested in him now. He's been kind of like beaten into the dirt, or that she's just meant to be a fickle character. Um,
Right. Right.
because
Yeah.
he doesn't give you these kind of pat answers. He
Right.
kind of gives you situations, and you have to kind of like try and figure out what's going on with them.
Yeah, I thought that she did it out of fear, like she wanted the violence to
Mm.
stop, so she just went with them, but then later what sort of really um you know really destroyed the relationship was she was the one who told him about that her what his mother was doing, and then that when he pushes
Yeah,
her, um he acts in a rage and then pushes her, so um
yeah,
and then that's when he really sort of self-destructs and starts to steal, and you know
yeah,
he talks about being sickly as a child, and then you start to see him coughing, and then of course it's so tragic in prison that they just
mm.
because he had that outburst that they just tied him up, and that's of course that
Yeah,
image we saw of Christ-like image, and he's his last sight is just looking at the last thing can see is just looking at those bars above his
yeah,
head. Um, yeah, it's a really really tragic story. Um,
yeah.
I wanted to
It's
read.
based on. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, yeah, based on a true
I was
story.
going to say it's based on a true story as well. There was a kind of case of this that happened a year or
Yeah,
so before the thing that Pasolini drew on. There's kind of in the mix of materials. It wasn't a direct adaptation of that story, but I think he was kind of inspired by that story. The child
yes,
dying in kind of prison.
yeah, yeah. I didn't know that. That was something I just recently read that it was based on a true story. Um,
Yeah.
Something the film critic Jonathan Rosenbaum, who I've was fortunate enough to interview a few times. I just read his review and
Oh,
on Mamma
nice.
Roma, and he says something interesting. He talks about the last image of the film, and he
Yeah.
says, and it seems appropriate that Pasolini's final image of blighted urban wasteland, of vacant lots surrounded by grimy buildings and a church should reverberate like an El Greco. I love the yeah, because I wondered why he ended it that way. I was like, but he's right.
Yeah.
He's like, you got an urban wasteland, a vacant lot, and a church. So and grimy buildings and stuff. So I was curious, why do you think he left it there with them looking at that?
Yeah. It's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, I
Yeah,
think it's. I mean, again, I guess it's the ultimate, open-ended ending. I mean, I think there's some people that think that she then commits suicide after it,
right. Because
or
she tries to
she,
jump. Right. Yeah.
yeah, or perhaps then she just kind of goes back, or it's the moment of, the kind of moment of decision for her, that kind of brokenness. And I think almost it. I mean, obviously the film overall kind of rejects the kind of happy Hollywood happy Hollywood
Yeah,
ending, but it also, I suppose, it's a way of resisting that tendency to kind of tie everything up neatly with a bow, because um, we're used to this story structure and this story narrative where there's a beginning, a middle, and then an end. But in real life, there isn't really
right.
ends and until you die.
Yeah,
And obviously her character's life has to go on, and it could go on in all kind of open-ended ways. And I suppose it leaves open that thing of she now has this kind of life that she's looked forward to, but she's also paid the ultimate price for it. And where does that leave her, and how does she respond to that, and how do we as an audience, I suppose, respond to what we've seen, and what the kind of warnings of the film, or the inspirations in the film, and how does that, I suppose it puts the by refusing to kind of tie things up and present a kind of nicely kind of presented story, it almost makes us come away and think, well, what did happen
yeah,
next, or what puts us in that situation. It's kind of
yeah,
very it's a very kind of clever way to end the film, I think.
yeah. Yeah, I thought so too. I thought maybe he was, he's criticizing the church in some way, like
Yeah.
everything around the church looks, horrible, like a slum, but
Mm.
yet you have a church there, so it's like why is the church not doing something
That's-
to better the lives of others? But then at the same time, we know that he sort of that he sort of admired the slums, and sort of admired the
yeah.
purity of those people. So I'm not really, I don't know. I mean, I because she talks about her view earlier. Then again, it was before she moved, because she's initially living in
Yeah.
some temporary place, and she talks about the view being ugly. So now she's in this new place, which is also doesn't have a great view. So maybe he's just saying she's stuck. Um,
Yeah.
and what's next is sort of, you know, anyone's guess is as good as his.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah. I
tough
mean,
one.
yeah, I feel like I need to go and watch that shot again to to get a bit more of a to really kind of take it in. But yeah, it's yeah. I mean, he kind of has this way, particularly with uh it's a Tonino Delicoli, isn't it, that does the cinematography.
Yeah. Yes.
Um and they kind of have this ability to make even the kind of all those kind of like scenes of kind of like run down urban decay, or kind of squalid living conditions as they were at the time in a lot of places, look somehow kind of mesmerizingly beautiful.
Yes.
and and,
Absolutely.
and again, and I guess that's part of his whole opposites thing as well. And his position on the church was as kind of ambiguous and fractious and contradictory as his
Yeah.
position with
Absolutely.
communism.
Yeah.
And so and so it's difficult to know when he's thinking the church is on something, when he's thinking
Yeah.
they are the problem. But
Right.
um yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, because but that's what's so interesting about him is those contradictions. I find was
Yeah.
partly so fascinating about his appeal, that he was not simple, that he had these,
No.
you know, and it shows those contradictions shows in his work, right? So you can look at those images, and it's like reading a poem, my
Yeah.
you the more time you read it, the better you come to some kind of understanding or interpretation. Like his movies, they just require more than one
Mm.
viewing, because they're not, in a way, this film is sort of easy to swallow on one hand, because you're sort of like, okay,
Yeah.
well, yeah, woman betters herself and things go wrong and son dies, and it's just like you can look at it just from that angle, like, oh yes, it's a tragedy. But it's
Yeah.
it's it's what he shows you and then doesn't show you that's so interesting. From
Mm.
all the examples we gave, and of, these images are so mysterious that they force you to think and interpret.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of course, he was a poet before he
Yeah,
got into filmmaking, and he kind of always talked about this kind of poetic cinema and this kind of sense about the kind of power of the individual images as well as the
Yes.
narrative. And even with, I mean, I think probably Mamma Roma is his most conventional narrative, in a
Yeah,
way, really.
probably. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, most kind of conventional film. Um, but even within that, as you say, the kind of poetry of what he's doing, and both in terms of like the images, but also the kind of the way he's using the kind of cinematic language and the way he's
Yeah.
arranging his shots and his compositions and his um, yeah, and his sound and all those things has that, you know, doesn't have that immediate um, yeah, it's poetry, not prose. It's
Right.
kind of choppy and um, giving you impressions and images rather than necessarily always drawing
Yeah.
things out. And
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. Well said. Um, I hit all of my notes on Mama Roma. Did you have any final thoughts?
uh, I know, I think that was the main thing. I was maybe got, I think I got a quote here. Was just yeah, the yeah, just this thing that we're going back to what we were saying. A kind of quote came across as him was saying the sacred can only enter when there is a void to receive it. And so that kind of idea of actually her kind of brokenness at the end of it, after having lost the death of her son, is kind of always puts her in that place to receive in the
Mm,
sacred. And again, this is the kind of not necessarily the sacred as understood by Catholicism, but his kind of more I suppose kind of primeval, more kind of folk religion understanding there as well. So yeah, so I kind of just wanted to bring that quote in.
yeah. Yeah, it's it's such a good movie. But you're right. I mean,
Yeah,
it's certainly his most I don't want to use the word conventional, accessible film. But then at
yeah,
the same time is still it's still quite challenging.
yeah.
But not perhaps not as challenging as his other films, but it's a phenomenal work. Um,
Mm.
okay, great. If people want to follow you, Matt, online or social media, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, I'm on Blue Sky as Matt Page Film. I occasionally appear on Twitter, but not very often these days. And I've got my blog, Bible Films blog, if people are interested in that. Kind of, it's probably only about a post a month, but I'm doing stuff there, so that's where people can find me.
Great, fantastic. And I'll leave the links in the description box below for where you can follow
Yeah,
Matt.
yeah. I've got a
Uh,
YouTube channel somewhere as well. I should probably mention that.
okay, okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of Italian things on there. I do a kind of like commentary track for Gospel according to St Matthew, Pasolini's version
Yes,
of that.
right,
So
right.
if people want to spend more time thinking about that film, then they can find that. So,
Yeah. All right, I'll leave that in the description box below as well. And then, of course, highly recommend Matt's book, 100 Bible Films, which we discussed already. That was already about 3 or 4 years ago. It's hard to believe.
yeah, I think it probably. I know. I think it's been 4 years this week because I've had a
Wow.
load of reminders coming up in Facebook
Oh,
posts
right.
from back then. So yeah, I don't know where that time's gone, but
It's just flown by. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, Matt also came on the show to talk about that. So I'll also leave that interview in the description box
Oh,
if anyone's interested. Well, Matt, thanks again for coming on. Really
that's
appreciate it.
okay. It's always a pleasure. I always enjoy our discussions about it.
Yeah,
So, sorry about film, and yeah,
me
always
too.
enjoy your videos. So thank you.
Thanks. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll have you back again sometime down the road for sure.
Great.
Uh,
Look forward to it.
Great. And those of you watching at home, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you all in the next episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing by pressing the RBellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. It is absolutely free to subscribe. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you are interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, I'd really appreciate the support. Please go to patreon.com/RobertBellissimo at the Movies for full details. Thank you again, everyone, for watching, and I will see you all in the next episode.